Hello and welcome to Default Asar, where we take on everything by default. I am your host, Demosthenes, and with me, as always, is Mr. Kyle Nash, ready to scare up some good times this October. How's it going, Kyle?
Listen, man, I'm ready to dive in and do some analysis that'll make your head spin.
For the month of October, we'll be covering some of the greatest, and perhaps not so greatest, horror films ever crafted. Do they live up to their scares, or have they lost their fear factor over time? To kick things off, we'll be taking a look at one of the most highly acclaimed entries in the genre, William Friedkin's 1973 terrifying tale of demon possession, The Exorcist. It's been called the scariest film of all time, and was the first horror film ever to be nominated for Best Picture. And there have been very, very few ever since. Arguably one of the first true blockbusters, predating Jaws, it was a sensation when it came out. To this day, I'm actually shocked that this film came out in 1973.
Yeah, that's a good point by you. And let me cut in right here immediately on this. Even now, 45 years later, with a less conservative mindset that we have in society with certain things like words and what's obscene and what's not, et cetera, there's still some stuff goes on in there that curls your hair today, man.
No other horror film had ever done or depicted some of the things that were shown in The Exorcist. And I think what really distinguishes it is that it takes its subject matter very seriously. We have seen since more outrageous things in horror films, but there's always kind of, I don't want to say tongue-in-cheek element, but there's it's always played to an exaggerated extent. This here, it hits you, and it hits you hard, whether you're religious or not, whether you actually believe in the reality of something like this happening. There is an intensely disturbing element to it. Now, you hadn't seen The Exorcist up until now.
I had not, right.
What were your expectations going into it?
Oh man, listen, I feel like this one, oddly enough, there's going to be some comparisons and juxtaposition made as far as me and my consumption of this movie, and it's not going to make sense until I explain it. But there are many ways that experiencing The Exorcist for the first time was very similar to experiencing The Godfather the first time. Now, granted, Vito Corleone saying the power of Christ compels you, it is not the same, but what I will tell you is where I'm coming from is, listen, in The Godfather, I could throw spoiler alerts all day, but chances are you already know stuff that's going to go on with Sonny in The Godfather. You already know that Michael is going to shoot somebody, and you are already going to know that somebody's going to leave a horse head in their bed, someone's bed, right? In The Exorcist, it involves a demonic possession. It involves at some point a head turning around and spitting, and it involves projectile vomiting. That stuff you already have going in, no matter how much you try to shield yourself. But much like The Godfather, when it comes to The Exorcist, despite the fact the horror genre, as I said, is not my particular cup of tea, I am forced to drop 3 words in this piece before we even get to the part of whether we decide it's required viewing. Regardless of my verdict at that point, what I will say now here is those 3 words. I get it. I understand why this was the horror film that got nominated. And I don't know what it was up against offhand. I'm sure you'll tell me in just a moment, but I'm sure it's competition. Like, listen, if we're in a year where Forrest Gump wins, maybe The Exorcist has a shot. I'm just saying.
One of my favorite films won. The Sting, my friend. The Exorcist was up against American Graffiti, Cries and Whispers, A Touch of Class, and The Sting. You couldn't get 2 films that were more different unless you were comparing The Exorcist to a Disney film.
Correct. And in that instance, because The Exorcist is so different, the fact that it got nominated cleared so many hurdles. You're in a situation that if you tied with The Sting in somebody's mind, air quotes, which would in itself be one hell of a phenomenon, your pardon expression, that's a fantastic accomplishment. And I could argue that The Exorcist has the potential to do that for people. People will still give the tie break to The Sting because in this concept, getting it nominated is really different than getting the thing that's new and different and throwing your vote at that.
Well, this thing by its very setting is far more old school. It's much more old fashioned. Arguably, it has much better written dialogue, and the chemistry between Newman and Redford is incredible. The Exorcist was, on the contrary, it wasn't as accessible, but it was pushing boundaries. The Exorcist was one of the films I knew about for a long time. I remember distinctly the first time I caught a glimpse of one of the scenes, and it was back when they were advertising the version that you've never seen, the director's cut, and the commercials on TV would show the one big addition to the film, which was the legendary spider walk. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. As a kid, when I saw that, I was freaked out beyond belief. I think that seeing just that one snippet at a young age, and trust me, that scene is so short in the film that the commercial, come to realize, pretty much showed most of it. Look out! Here comes the Spider-Man! It took me many years to actually see the film. My parents had seen it. My mother would not allow it. I saw many other films before I saw it. I saw The Shining. I saw The Omen. I saw a lot of films that were inspired by The Exorcist before I actually finally saw that film. And when I did finally sit down to see it, all the scenes that you just mentioned, the head spin, the projectile vomit, the most famous scenes from the film, were the scenes that I found the lightest, the scenes that didn't scare me or irk me in any way whatsoever. I found the first half of the film, some scenes from the first half of the film, to be far more disturbing and terrifying. Her initial possessions, when she's convulsing up and down on the bed, that stuff is freaky, probably because it's closer to reality.
Right, agreed. And listen, when you're having to push the bounds of possibility to where suspension of belief is necessary to absorb, it's tougher to have that land as well. And I'm not trying to sit here and do stupid stuff like tell you it doesn't land, because it does. But it doesn't land quite the same as the when she's bouncing on up and down on the bed like this with her whole body. And oh my gosh, this is probably going to be terrible sound editing for you, but deal with the demos. But the
hospital scenes as well had this antiseptic, very clinical, cut and dry quality to them. They actually used real hospital technicians. For me, those scenes were the scariest in the film when I saw them. And as far as my research into The Exorcist goes, a very large number of people, those were the scenes that affected them the most.
Here's another way that Exorcist and Godfather are comparable. Once one of those movies did something, it then became standard for the genre. First of all, maybe there was there was definitely a gangster genre before The Godfather, but people started doing things a certain way after The Godfather was a thing. If there was demonic possession movies, they weren't big name stuff. Like, you didn't have the James Cagney of demonic possession back in the day. That shiz did not happen, friends. But then afterward, to your point, you have The Omen, Damien, The Shining, etc. And even still in the 2000s, there are demonic possession.
Emily Rose.
Exactly. Very good. And then, even the comic book world was affected, coming out with Constantine. Okay. Which, by the way, very awesome character in and of itself.
It was the 1-2 punch between The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby that really got that genre going.
There you go. I'm glad. I wanted to go there. I just couldn't conjure the name of the movie, but the look of a possessed individual, that's all Exorcist, right? The buggy eyes, the altered skin where it's almost scale-like.
The speech patterns.
The speech pattern, very good. And even the look and feel of some stuff, which jumps me into this. With a lot of suspense, how much have we gone on in Hitchcock, right? As the master of suspense, who does the counterintuitive in motion picture of telling, not showing, or implying and not showing, right? There's something that I found, and this is just my take, with The Exorcist that's very unique in the setup of the suspense, right? They go in and they do the jump cuts of this face, this mask, this visage, if you will. And they do everything they can to say, hey, it's demon time, motherfucker. Yeah. You know he's in the room. You know it's coming. And yet still somehow it blows your goddamn mind whenever it delivers what it's going to deliver.
I have to say something about the demon face. One point of trivia and another more of a clarification. That original face was a makeup test photo for the initial. They were trying to find a unique way to show Reagan being possessed, and that was one of the original ideas. That she was going to end up looking somewhat like that. Now the director's cut added a lot more of those flashes than in the original film. I wanted to see how surprised you were that this film opened up, that its entire opening is in Iraq, of all places. That entire 20-minute Raiders of the Lost Ark-esque sequence.
I was not expected, obviously. For those who don't know their history, the Fertile Plain and whatnot, Samaria, et cetera, is ancient Persia. So when I see that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is your demonic origin. And I'm glad you brought that scene, Demos, because at the very beginning, when they first start with the dig and they're talking in the different language and they have the subtitles and all this, and he goes to that hole at the base of the mound where the guy tells him to go, and he starts reaching around and poking in there. That's when I knew I was in some next level filmmaking there, because there was just something about the way they put that together. I didn't know whether something was going to jump out that mofo or not, but I knew that something was happening right then.
And that's one of the things I really wanted to mention about the tension of this film is a lot of horror films, especially nowadays, they build tension and immediate release with a jump scare. And then you have to rebuild that tension. This film, I don't think I mean, you can argue like one or two scenes are mild jump scares. The tension just keeps building and building and building throughout towards the climax. And I think that's one of the reasons that this film is just so goddamn gripping.
Yeah. And now granted, and they're smart enough to give you breaks to not tire you out either. It's weird. Like they're still building and breaking at the same time. It's almost an actual beating heart, so to speak, that's resting between beats, building this tension, right? And you know, but going back to what I was saying about like they'll flash the face in some of these scenes. It's another subtle way. It's almost arrogant, in the way that I break it down. And of course, this is my problem is I have an element of sport in my brain here. Like, you know, you've won, or you're taking somebody on, in this case, your audience, and like, you know what? I'm going to show you what's coming, and I'm still going to scare you.
There was a lot of talk about and controversy regarding this film and subliminal messaging.
Right.
Those flashes in particular being one.
I use subliminal cut as a term. I didn't know that this technically counts as that.
Well, that was the argument. Director William Friedkin said, well, if you see it, if it's visible, you actually catch those glimpses. Is it really subliminal messaging? What I find to be much more intriguing as far as a subliminal effect that this film has on you is the fact that they were using, especially in the early scenes, they're using bees, buzzing bees on the soundtrack, to kind of irk you up.
Very legit. And you know, we're gonna go that direction with the sound. The way they tone the voice of whatever the hell it is that's taking control of Reagan, man, listen. At first, it sounds almost cheesy because, like, look, this little girl has a deep voice. The fuck's going on right now? I don't understand. I just made Demos bleep. What have I done? You know. And then as the look starts to fit better, oh, that voice belongs. Diabolical.
There's an interesting story regarding the lady that did that voice. She was a recovering alcoholic, etc. She had to eat raw eggs and do all these terrible things herself. They had to tie her down to a chair to do it. And after numerous takes, she actually had, I think it was 2 priests to be there for her. It was taxing on this voice actress. The very fact that they had the balls to cast a 12-year-old girl to act these scenes out. They were considering getting an older girl for a while. In fact, Linda Blair's mother then insisted that she end up doing it. And the directors were like, do you realize what we're going to do with your daughter? Do you realize that what she's going to do with the crucifix? And she's like, yeah, masturbation, right? Okay, I guess we got our actress. It's a brave child performance, but I think it does speak to, there is a subliminal, and to use that word again, but there is a subliminal effect to when you as a viewer are watching this, and deep down it's all an act, but at the same time, it's a 12-year-old girl putting on this act. That enhances the terror, I think.
Listen, man, you got my text. And granted, my dumb ass made the mistake of actually watching this after a recording of dinner time, so it was late at night. So you better bet to make sure my ass could get up for work the next day, or rather, I should say, so my ass could go to sleep in order to get up for work the next day. I was watching it in a room, well lit, all that trash. Didn't matter a whole lot, but that's a whole other topic. Throughout the movie, what made me troubled wasn't, I mean, granted, it was plenty thrilling, and there was lots of climax and some quality filmmaking to hold that atmosphere. I'm taking nothing from it, but my personal experience, what I couldn't get past is throughout, I'm like, this poor friggin' girl. In my mind, I'm like, listen, apply Dragon Age rules from the Dragon Age universe so I can fight this demon one-on-one, man, because no, what you're doing to this, like, I couldn't, it became difficult for me to watch during the time. And keep in mind, like, there was a thump outside my house.
Oh, Christ.
Now, granted, no, I could see why you would say, though, the power of Christ might compel you to think that way, Demos. But no, but the thing of it is, it's a sound I've heard several times. We have a big oak outside. If the wind blows just so, thong, it hits something. It did that. I know what that sound is. My brain even said, oh yeah, that's the damn oak outside. Sure as hell, I still jumped a foot out of my friggin' couch. And oh, by the way, during this thing as well, my 4-year-old daughter happened to have a bad dream and cry out from her room for
Christ.
Yeah, right.
Compelled me again. I'm sorry.
Listen, but like, so I've been over way too many times on this and other shows how much of a pansy I am when it comes to my little girl in general, since I've become a parent. So for that vibe to exist by using the air quotes proper aged actress, I know it affected me.
The author William Peter Blatty, who also co-wrote one of the Pink Panther films, FYI, which the funniest one, in my opinion, is Shot in the Dark.
Now then, members of the household staff have testified that Miguel Ostos beat. Pepper, you fool, you've broken my pointing stick. I got nothing to point with now.
It's a shot in the dark. You would link those two. That's what I'm saying.
But he actually got access through the church. He got access to certain files of real quote unquote exorcisms. And there is an authenticity in this film. I like the intersection that this film has between science and faith, and especially embodied by the character of Karras, who comes from science and is losing his faith.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I'm Harvard educated, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Although I do find it, I think one of the biggest flaws of the film is I've never met a Greek who was a Catholic. Even Greek Orthodox. What the hell? His mother's rambling on in Greek with no subtitles, by the way. So I can translate the fact that in the hospital scene she was telling him that he wasn't her son, which is kind of creepier.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think of Marin, played by Max von Sydow? He was 44 at the time. The whole time he had makeup on. In fact, there's certain scenes near the end of the film where they have close-ups of him where he had more makeup on than Linda Blair did. And you didn't notice. Most people probably didn't really notice.
Max von Sydow, listen, he's a guy that ends up having a good career in the way that I mean, he's one of those underappreciated guys who's really it's kind of almost JT Walshian, I think. Like, you don't know his name, but you've seen the guy, you know the face. I really think there's certain little things in his mannerism that, even though allegedly exorcism is something that hasn't been done in all these different years, it's been many years, blah, 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 blah. Nobody knows anything about it. But somehow Father Marin is locked in. Oh, well, shouldn't we go report blah, blah, blah? No, I don't think we, he doesn't exactly say, no, I don't think we need to do that. But he's like, no, let's proceed. And like, it's very clear when the two of them are walking up the stairs for the first confrontation scene, the issue's about to go on. That is a battle scene is coming. Like, they might as well play the final countdown as they're walking in there, right? Right? Come on, man.
I think I have two different impressions of this, because when I first saw it as a kid, I was kind of disappointed in the way that his story played out. And then I read the novel, which kind of delves a little bit. And this is a film that's very faithful to the novel.
Your pardon expression.
Oh, probably because the author also wrote the screenplay and ended up directing Exorcist 3. The demon, it's kind of touched on the film. She calls out Marin's name beforehand. But in the novel, it's almost as if she's disappointed that he died. She wanted him there. She wanted to have this battle. And the demon was threatening the life of the girl. She wanted to... This was basically going to be Marin's comeuppance, so he couldn't save this girl, and that the demon was going to kill the girl in front of him. And... which makes his death a much more pivotal moment in the novel as opposed to the film.
Not that it was unpivotal.
I'm not saying it wasn't, but in many ways it could be argued that it's a Christian film beyond it that falls into that genre. I mean, this is a film where the priests are the superheroes and they beat the devil.
Well, let's put it this way. If the priests are the superheroes in this movie, they're Hawkeye and Black Widow facing off in hand-to-hand combat with Thanos, and then beat him on a technicality. That's pretty much what happens. And granted, I enjoy the technicality in question, and I'll go ahead and get to the spoiler here of it. I liked it was very creative. I didn't see it coming. I'm like, oh, okay, well, they killed Marin. Well, there's no way they're going to kill oh my God, they totally did. If you're looking for any fancy dialogue or looking for any, I don't want to say character building, you're not really going to get that here. Whoever the director is, that name probably well better.
William Friedkin, he had been most famous for doing The French Connection right before.
So he's more, wow, really? Mm-hmm. He's more, never mind. That could be a whole other friggin' episode in itself. How do you,
and then he also directed the, a Chevy Chase comedy called Deal of the Century later on. He's very varied in the films he has done. I'll just leave it at that.
That is versatility, for sure. But, yeah, so, I don't know. This might be somebody who's more technically inclined. A lot of the marvels of the movie were technical in nature. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, the acting was bad. No, nothing like that. But easily the strongest performances are by, a 12-year-old and a voice actor. right? So, and of course Max von Sydow. I don't mention him because he's in the movie at least.
He bookends the film.
Thank you. Well done. So the punchline is like Linda Blair's mother is almost annoying.
Ellen Burstyn.
But I still kind of feel like the character has to be somewhat annoying.
If you're talking about characterization, I felt that Scariest and his backstory with his mother was actually gripping. He is the crux of this film. He's the one that kind of holds this narrative together, the loss of faith and the regaining of faith, etc., etc.
If there's anything amongst the people who aren't enhanced by something in some way, like a voice acting or a crazy technique or something, Father Karras is the spot. And like the whole scene where he finds out what he needs to find out to really start to, like, after the first encounter, he's going to talk to the mother and he's like, no, sit down. Do you want a drink? What are you drinking? Scotch. Ice and water, please. Oh, well, I got to go in the kitchen, get ice. No, that's fine. Just sit down.
Just hand me the bottle. Just hand me the bottle.
Seriously, that's what you would have to do to make any hyperbole in that scene. It's like, bitch, just hand me the bottle. Cut. Work on bitch, okay? He can't say that. He's still a Padre somewhere in his mind, you know.
So overall, and I think that this is the point where we're actually going to talk mostly about a lot of the stuff that we like through the question of whether or not you feel that The Exorcist is required viewing.
When you're talking about horror and you're talking about a movie that's required reading, to my element, it's like nobody knows anything about professional skateboarders, but everybody knows who Tony Hawk is. Not everybody knows about the NBA, but everybody knows who Michael Jordan and LeBron James are. Not everybody knows about dodgeball, but everybody knows who O'Houlihan is. Okay. But the punch, yes, that was a joke. But the punchline is, not everybody knows or does horror films, but The Exorcist is still a famous name in movie making. And if to dub, to go ahead and initiate the drinking game on behalf of our good friend Tokyo Jameson, listen, if you watch movies for experiences, this shiz is an experience of some kind. I ain't going to tell you it's negative or positive, but it evokes emotion and it is an experience. If you find yourself to be any sort of a horror person, it is required reading. If you are any sort of a cinephile, it is required viewing.
Horror is not really one of the genres that I go to. However, when it is done well, I appreciate it. And God knows that we'll be covering at least one other film this month that it does rank among my favorites when it comes to the genre. I think that...
favorites. I was about to say we were covering at least one other horror movie. I'm like, damn, Major League 2 wasn't that bad. Hi-yo!
We haven't gone to Major League 2 yet, but we'll get to that. I think its reputation is what made me seek it out and watch it. And the
power of film compelled
the power of cinema compelled me to watch this. I don't know if I'd even be up to say it's the scariest film of all time. You just mentioned Major League 2, which I and there are definitely, and we're serious, so there are some documentaries I've seen that scare me in a much more realistic manner.
It's a concept. I don't know what to make of that, but that's a good point by you.
Films that have a lot of jump scenes and a lot of gore to create faux scares tend to annoy me. I want to find a thematic element in the film that legitimately scares me. And The Exorcist has a lot of those elements. And I think it also kind of goes to the point where I say that there are a lot of moments in the first half of the film where it is a little bit more grounded that I find more terrifying than some of the more famous scenes later on. The last half of the film, and perhaps it's because there are a lot of the most parodied elements from the film happen in the last half. Once she gets on the full facial transformation and she's spinning her head, I'm like, that didn't really scare me, but I became much more fascinated with the way that it was being depicted, the atmosphere during those scenes, and the acting from Max von Sydow and Jason Miller. Everything sold those scenes from a cinematic standpoint. The one scene where she's on the bed and she's reaching out towards the ceiling with bathed in silhouette is phenomenal to see.
The power of film compelled us to watch and enjoy this movie. This movie was so special that it forced us to respect it, and we were still marveled by it. We knew it was coming, and it still had impact on us. Demos, if that doesn't say to you required reading, I can't help you, and you are damned, period. Oh, great. More religious humor.
Well, I do agree. I do definitely maintain this is required viewing. Not just...
That's an agreement we've had in a while.
So, what did you all think of The Exorcist? Do you guys think it's the scariest film of all time? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's required viewing? Let us know in the comments below, and hit us up if you guys have horror films that you'd like us to cover on the show at one point or another. Please don't say Exorcist 2. Let us know. And you can, of course, find me on hilaritybydefault.com, where we do fun stuff every week. I'm also on Twitter at Default Hilarity, and on Facebook and Instagram, Hilarity by Default. Kyle, where can we find you?
Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter at the SOTG. You can find me on Instagram as the same, the SOTG. You can find me on Facebook as the student of the game. You can see all my writings about the UCF Knights football team as they go on once again. Having a pretty strong campaign here in 2018. You can see that on sportsmediapass.com, a company of Blue HQ Media. Of course, you can see me on this show, Hilarity by Default, where I contribute on hilaritybydefault.com every now and again. Then you can also check me out Tuesday nights live, or you can just check out the recorded versions of Dinner Time, where I hang out with my man Tokyo Jameson, talking the various ins and outs of society and just stuff that's kind of cool in general. Yeah, man, that's the all the way around. Great episode, this one, I think.
Yes, I'm also excited because next week, we talked about him a little bit tonight. Next week, we'll be going right back to Alfred Hitchcock. We'll be talking about Psycho. And no, not the remake, which is scary for different reasons.
Yes.
Well, so make sure to tune in for Psycho next week, where life is hilarious by default.
The power of hilarity compels you.
By default.